What the Speak, Episode 10. Ain't nobody dope as me, I'm just so fresh, so clean.
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What the Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
Struggling with feeling comfortable in front of an audience when you present? Or maybe you're confident, but you have difficulty stumbling over filler words like and ah. Well, you can start kicking ass today by signing up for our weekly VIP updates. As a bonus, you'll also receive 11 free tips that will uncover 6 psychological secrets to public speaking, plus 5 tips on how to stop using filler words. Go to whatthespeak.com/VIP. Derek Halpern is the founder of socialtriggers.com, the top marketing and psychology blog with more than 100,000 readers each month. Derek has a very interesting story about how just a couple years ago, he didn't know anything about public speaking and in fact tells a story about how bad he was the first time he gave a presentation. Then he describes how he completely turned that around to a place where now he is a top paid speaker at conferences all across the US. Derek has a great story and I'm thrilled to have him share it with you guys today. Also, at the very end, Derek reveals an interesting surprise twist about his story as a public speaker. Derek, I'm a tremendous fan and I'm stoked to have you here, so thanks for coming.
Yo, what's up? Thanks for having me.
Now, I have really admired how you've transformed from what you've described as the world's worst speaker into somebody who I think does a pretty dang good job. So I want to go behind the scenes with you on this. Does that sound cool?
Yeah, let's do this.
All right. So I know your story goes back a couple years to the beginning of 2011 and kind of one of your first speaking opportunities. You were at the Affiliate Summit. I know you've mentioned there's a video out there on YouTube where we can kind of see what you were doing when you were speaking. But can you talk a little bit about that starting point and kind of how you progressed during the course of 2011 after you had that experience?
Yeah, so let's just take this back. Before I launched Social Triggers in March of 2011. So before I launched, I was like, you know what? I've been doing web marketing at this point for like 6 years because I started back in 2005, but I knew I wanted to talk about online marketing. But I was like, before I launched the website, I was kind of getting my feet wet in January of 2011 by giving my first speaking engagement to just kind of see how I felt giving a speaking engagement like that, right?
Yep.
And then I realized something. My content was great. I knew what I was talking about. But when you actually watch me speak, it's the worst presentation in the world. Like, sure, if you were able to not fall asleep while listening to me, you would realize that, sure, this guy's got some good stuff to say, but I was not a speaker. I was a content expert, but I wasn't a speaker. And you know what? I remember a friend of mine came up to me after the session. He's like, you know, Derek, you're a good friend of mine. I really appreciate your content. You know, I think you can do this, but you got to practice your speaking, your presenting ability. So I took that to heart. After the world's worst speaking engagement, I mean, mind you, it wasn't really that bad. I got actually average reviews, but it wasn't, to me, average might as well have been a 0. So I felt like I got a 0. So after that, I had resolved to the fact that I was going to be a really good speaker. And I studied up. I bought every book you could possibly imagine about speaking. I watched TED Talks, the most popular TED Talks of other speakers, and I kind of deconstructed how they told stories. I deconstructed how they enunciated their words, how they paused, how they used their hands, the way they turned their head. I kind of deconstructed everything over the course of a few months. It just so happened that I had another speaking engagement coming up, and this was going to be to a larger audience than my first one. This one was going to be alongside, actually, some other New York Times bestselling authors. And I managed to get a speaking engagement there. So I gave my second speaking engagement after practicing, studying, doing all the work, and I just nailed it. I honestly just nailed it. I remember people came up to me afterwards. They're like, Derek, you're such a great speaker, blah, blah, blah. I was like, thank you so much. And I said this was the second time I ever spoke in front of an event. And they just like were in complete awe. So that's kind of like my journey from disaster to somewhat okay as a speaker. And then since then, I went on to give more than 60 more speaking engagements all over the United States, some in Canada or whatever. And I proceeded to continue to develop my ability.
So I think this is interesting because, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different speakers, and oftentimes you hear this theme of if you really know your content, the rest can kind of all fall into place. But I think what's interesting in what you're saying is that beyond the content, there's all of these nuances, there's all of these different components to being able to engage an audience, to do things in a way that you're compelling, that you're interesting, that you're really connecting with the audience. So
yeah,
I'd really be curious to see if we can break down the process a little bit more. I know I've heard you say that you truly believe that no one is inherently talented, but you got to have this desire to improve, and that you have a process that you go through to actively consume information and work on improving. So, it sounds like there's a big gap from that first to that second speaking engagement. What are some of the ways, if we can dive in a little bit more to how you were able to do that?
Yeah. So let's take it back from step one. I said that I read a lot of books. I happen to be one of those people that can teach himself anything from a book. That's just the way my mind works. Like if I have a book, I read the book, I can teach myself pretty much anything. So I got a lot of books. The books that were real big standouts at this time were the 2 books by Nancy Duarte. And I actually saw that you had her on your show.
Yep.
But Nancy Duarte's 2 books, Slideology and Resonate, were lifesavers for people who want to learn how to speak. Now, what was interesting, at this point, I had resolved to the fact that I was going to speak without slides. I noticed a lot of people at conferences use their slides as a crutch, and I thought if I could master presenting without slides first, I could worry about slides later. So that's where you say the content matters, right?
Yep.
Your content does matter. Your stories matter. Your points matter. Your sound bites. All this stuff matters, and you can learn a lot of that in Nancy Duarte's book, Resonate. However, what you can't learn from a book is how to enunciate, how to act, how to walk, how to move. That's where the TED Talks came into play. So I learned how to create my content and structure my content from the book, and I learned how to move from the TED Talks. So that's kind of what I did in those first couple of months. Focused on just those 2 books by Duarte, and then learned how to move from TED Talks.
Perfect. All right, now let's change gears a little bit. I know that you teach people how to use psychology for online marketing.
Yeah.
How have you used psychology to craft your presentations? Are there any things that you've done with pulling together these presentations, these 50 or 60 some odd presentations that you've done fairly recently?
Yep.
Any tips or tricks related to psychology in that presentation environment?
Yeah, so 2 things I want to share. First thing, there's something called the information gap, which quite simply is when there's a gap between what people know and what people want to know, they desperately seek to close that gap. All right? This is how curiosity works. This was based off of a paper from George Lowenstein. Now, how does this work with presenting? Well, I tend to open information gaps as I speak. And the way I do that is I'll give people, like, in this video, I'm going to reveal, or in this presentation, I'm going to reveal how I believe the customer coma is killing your sales. Right there, you're already thinking like, whoa, this guy's going to tell me why my sales are crap, but because of this customer coma thing. I just opened this gap in my speech that makes you want to know what that is. So that's the first principle, the information gap. You want to seek to give your information in a way that makes people want to continue listening. The second thing, and I love this, if you can kick off your presentation in the first like 10 minutes or so and give people something insanely practical, something that they can actually stop, think, and be like, I can use this right now, they will listen to every other word you have to say. And this just takes advantage of the idea of the power of small wins, which in psychology, again, is if you give people a small little win, they're going to keep trucking along till they get the bigger wins later. So those are the two principles I think that apply most to presenters when they're speaking.
Love it. All right, so now what I'd like to explore with you a little bit is how has speaking had an impact on your business? And specifically, I think this ties into the videos that you're doing nowadays. Is there anything that you can share on this topic of the impact that speaking's had on your business in the last 2 years, and ultimately how that's led to you really doing some kick-ass videos?
So speaking was not the precursor to kick-ass videos.
Okay.
That's actually a wrong assessment. What speaking has done for my business is not really tangible because I never did speaking engagements where I was selling from the stage. I mainly did speaking engagements where I was giving up free content from the stage and building authority or credibility or whatnot to a couple hundred people. So when you look at it from that perspective, the idea of growing my business, speaking was absolutely worthless. However, there's one thing that speaking did great, and it forced me to go to events and connect with the right people. I mean, at this point, I was just getting started with the online marketing space, so I had a couple of friends. But I was looking to really expand my network. And there's no better way to do that than to be a speaker at a conference because other speakers want to connect with the other speakers, and it's a good way to open a line of communication between both of you.
Yeah.
So it really helped me build my network, not necessarily my business.
Got it. So you said that video, you were doing videos first, or I want to talk about like how you've been able to really capture the essence of who you are in these videos that you do, a couple every month or whatever, and how you've been able to, that intersection between getting up in front of an audience of people and doing the same exact thing where you're holding their attention, you're pulling them along through the story or the content that you're delivering.
Yeah. I believe it's two different skills, though. I mean, I think that you think that speaking in an event, I mean, speaking at a conference where there's real people is a different experience than speaking to a camera. So it's not the same thing. You pull energy from the room when you speak. You don't pull energy from the camera.
Yeah.
Now, you want to know what does the videos have to do with my business. Now, videos are integral to my business. I put out a video each week. Actually, at socialcircus.com, you'll notice my videos are super high quality. It actually costs me anywhere from $1,000 or more to produce each 5-minute video. So I release these for free as a way to be, one, cool, and two, because it's a great way to build credibility, authority, and exposure in my target market. But if you want to know how to create great videos, on the other hand, every video that I create follows a simple template. Step 1, in this video, you're going to learn XYZ. Step 2, tell a story that illuminates what you're about to share. Step 3, give the content. Step 4, ask people to do something. Subscribe, share, comment. So 4 steps to video is, here's what you're going to learn, story, action plan, share. That's how I create effective online video.
Fantastic. All right, so here we're going to drop a bomb. We've been talking about speaking this whole time, and recently, or fairly recently, you've made a decision to, after 60 some odd opportunities to speak in front of a live audience, you've decided to kind of hang your hat up in that arena and go a different direction to focus on that. Can you share a little bit of the reasons why you're kind of hanging up speaking and focusing on other areas?
Yeah, so over the course of 2 years, it's got to be like more than 60 speaking engagements. I think it might even be approaching 80 at this point, but it was a ton. And to be honest with you, I just got burnt out. I started to get really good at speaking, which is great. So I was doing originally all this speaking for practice. I wanted to be a great speaker. That way, when the time came that I had to give the speech of my lifetime, I already had the practice I needed to do it. So now I quit because I got burnt out first, but second, I also felt like I accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish within that speaking realm. So instead of speaking 2 or 3 times a month or however much I was speaking at the time, I could slow it down and quit speaking altogether. And I say quit speaking, when I say quit speaking, that really means I'll do 1, 2, or 3 presentations in a year, not per month.
Right.
So I'm just cutting down because the benefit I was getting from it was deteriorating. It got to a point where you go to a conference. I told you I mainly did speaking to build my network.
Right.
But it got to a point where I was going to events, and I already knew everyone that I wanted to know. So why do I got to keep going to events?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, cool. So to kind of wrap things up, we've got just a couple minutes here. I would love to hear from you for somebody who's just getting started and is maybe struggling a little bit with getting up in front of an audience. What's one tip, one trick, whatever, that you would share with them or encourage them to focus on thinking about?
Yeah, honestly, it's not one thing. I'll tell them one thing they should do right now. Well, maybe 2 things. One thing, go buy Resonate from Nancy Duarte.
Yep.
I literally attribute all of my success in the beginning with speaking to that book. So go buy that book. But the second thing you should do is stop worrying about the exact content you're trying to share and instead worry about how you plan to deliver that content and really work on the delivery, because it's probably more important. The delivery, I believe, is more important than what you're saying. I know a few speakers that actually get up there, say nothing, have great delivery, and people love them. So,
no, most of us, if we're getting up in front of an audience and speaking, we're there for a reason, because of the content.
Yeah.
We're not just randomly getting up in front of an audience and saying, hey, I want to speak. So the content thing is kind of a given. It's a no-brainer. But really being able to connect with that audience and do so in a way that's not boring is really the roughest, toughest thing, I think.
Yep.
So
absolutely. It's tough, and you know what? It takes practice.
Absolutely.
Like people ask me now, how'd you become a good speaker? It honestly, I just spoke so much that I didn't have a choice. A lot of people, they get up. This is kind of like a little rant before we end, I guess, but a lot of people think just going through the motions is going to make them better. Let me just keep writing more blog posts and I'll become a better writer. Let me keep doing more speaking engagements and I'll become a better speaker. And I call BS on that. Let me tell you why. Because the fact that just speaking or writing is not going to make you better. You got to speak. You got to watch the video that you just did of that speaking engagement, and you got to tear yourself apart. Let me tell you, watching that affiliate summit one, I was horrible. It's horrible. It's painful to watch. I tore myself apart. And then I went out to make sure I didn't make those mistakes again. And actually, I remember I was on like my 6th speaking engagement to a few hundred people or whatever. I got off stage and people, they clapped or whatever. I did a good job. I walked out. A friend of mine goes, "So Derek, how do you think you did?" And I just looked at him. I was like, honestly, I did horrible. And he was like, "What do you mean? Everyone loved it." I was like, well, it's not about the fact that everyone else loved it. That's not what I'm talking about here. They loved it. I didn't love it. I need to get better.
Yep. Well, I had in high school and college, I ran track, and one of my coaches said, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And if you're not practicing the right things, you're setting yourself up for failure. So that's where I think what you're saying with evaluating and being critical of your presentation is another essential thing that a lot of us probably don't think about, to where we can say, oh my gosh, I keep saying every 5 words, or I'm keeping my hands in my pockets, which is kind of disconnecting me from the audience or whatever it is, you're able to identify that. And if you just keep practicing the same old thing over and over and over, you're not going to get any better. You got to identify what are the areas that need improvement and then go and improve those things.
You know how many people, even experienced speakers, still say the word every other word?
Mm-hmm.
It is, honestly, it's like shattered glass in your eardrums, especially if you're listening. It just makes you sound like you don't know what you're talking about. And eliminating actually from your speaking is probably one of the best things you can do. Absolutely.
It's a tough thing to do as well. And if you get that out, something else kind of creeps in. So you got to watch out for those filler words.
Yes.
Cool. Well, Derek, thanks again. Appreciate your time. It was fantastic having you here on the show. And maybe we'll be able to catch up with you some other time.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Are you working out right now or listening to this episode while driving? If so, I know you're not able to leave a rating and review in iTunes at the moment. However, next time you're in front of your computer or smartphone, could you be sure to do so? Just go to whatthespeak.com/audio or whatthespeak.com/video. Thanks so much for your support.
All right, here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What to Speak. Be sure to visit whatthespeak.com for show notes on every episode and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.